welcome to the Circles podcast. As many of you are aware, there's been a big contraction in the tech sector with massive layoffs across the industry. Today, we're spotlighting the impact of these layoffs on the graduating Gen Z students. So, our guest today is COLIN SCHWIETHALE, who's a student who's carved out an independent path to achieve his professional goals. Welcome, COLIN.
Thank you for having me, Charlene.
Thank you for coming. My ears are, oh my gosh, I can tell they're still popping from the plane. COLIN, can you tell us a little about the background that you're studying, and tell us sort of how you came to the decision to study that field?
Yeah, so I just graduated with a bachelor's degree in social work, and I'm going to be pursuing my master's later this month. Originally, I was going to study, I don't think I had decided on a degree yet, but some sort of pre-law degree and go into a law track. A lot of my family members are lawyers, and in skills that translated to social work, a lot of the reading, writing, comprehension, even the understanding of people translates very well to law.
Right.
When you're constructing arguments and when you're reading briefs and doing all of that, even how you write briefs, right? That sort of persuasive way of writing.
A lot of things are suddenly making sense there, COLIN.
So I found I didn't really want to do law. Granted, at the time, I didn't know. My exposure to law was mostly just in criminal law primarily, along with some big law and corporate law stuff. I didn't.
Right.
I may have gone to law if I had known about like legal clinics, things like that. That would have appealed more to me. But I wanted to work in a field where you can make a real difference. Over time, my perspectives, the sort of rose-colored glasses have changed some. I think legal aid probably would have been a good choice, but regardless, I ended up about 3 months before I was supposed to go to my undergraduate program. I ended up changing majors and changing schools. I went from I believe I was going to do 2 years at Bellevue College and then hopefully transfer into UW.
Yeah.
But I ended up going to an online school called Torrey University Worldwide and doing their their BSW program.
So you got your 4-year degree from an online university, an online program. Right. And how did you find this program? I mean, did it take you a while to?
It actually took me about 2 hours. I knew that I really wasn't big on law at the time. I didn't think it was going to be a good career path.
Yeah.
And my great-grandmother was a social worker before that was a formalized licensed profession in the 1920s through the 1950s, I believe. Maybe a little bit later than that.
Ah, interesting.
But somewhere within that time period.
Yeah.
And that field has always appealed to me. Mm-hmm. So I went looking for schools. The one I went with, it's part of the Toro school systems out of New York. That's a Jewish school, so I like that. I like their values.
It's a private school.
It's a private nonprofit.
Interesting. And how long has the curriculum program been around for a 4-year? That's kind of unusual, right? Is that unusual?
I'm sorry.
To a 4-year curriculum with an accredited degree for an online school. They haven't been around very long, right?
I think it depends a lot on the program. Social work, because social work has the CSW, the Council of Social Work Education, because they have very strict curriculum requirements, things like having to do a 450 to 500 hour internship.
Oh, wow.
That is typically will be done during the day, during working hours.
Yeah.
Online programs exist to be able to work around that.
Oh,
because
I see.
it can be very difficult for you to have to go to school in person.
Yeah.
And then have to spend 2 days a week or 3 days or however many days it takes to work with that.
So they already have these programs. That's not sort of something new. They've actually
I've seen programs that have existed from the 70s and 80s, I believe, from some of the older universities.
Yeah.
The program I went to was a newer one. I think they've been around 5 or 10 years, something like that.
I see.
So 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
5 years from start, so like 8 to 9 now.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there are more and more, but a lot of these online universities are not. It's sort of still a new field. So it's interesting that you found one that was.
It can be. hit or miss. Part of what I like about the social work degree is because it requires that component of field training and practicum training.
Yeah.
There is always a level of consistency throughout it.
Right.
Like you will have, even if you don't feel that your educational programs were necessarily the strongest, you will have that field component
Right.
to where I feel confident. I don't have anything to compare it to. I thought the school was fine. I did feel I learned substantially more throughout the practicum portion of it than anything else.
Interesting. What did your family think of your choice since you were going?
I think they were generally supportive. I think my dad I was going to go into either criminal defense or constitutional law, and I think my father really wanted me to go into constitutional law.
Yeah.
That was a big hope of his.
And why did you not pursue like a normal educational path, like going, because the UW does have a social work program?
To be honest, I probably couldn't get into to UW with the grades I had at that time. I would have to transfer in, and when I decided to go for that online school, it was partially because I had a job and I liked it, and I didn't want any sort of sudden changes.
Mm-hmm.
It was partially because I liked the values of that school, and that was a substantial impact
Right.
to where I wanted to go. It was also more affordable.
Yeah.
Certainly.
It's a big, well, generally speaking, education's very, very expensive.
Yeah, it cost about $14,000 a year, I believe, which
Wow.
did leave me with enough. I will be able to go to a master's program now, which I would not have been able to afford had I gone out of state. And Washington has pretty limited states. Even there is Seattle University, but it's Jesuit school, so I probably wouldn't go there.
Well, and it's also it's private. It's
Yeah,
kind of expensive.
it's also
right?
it is also a very expensive school.
Yeah. I think the cost of education for your generation is really it's a tough situation, because when you get to that level of competitiveness, it almost has no meaning. It's literally a numbers game at that point. It doesn't really have anything to do with whether the candidates are good, because a good percentage of those candidates, even the ones that were not, that didn't make an admission, are still really talented people. It's just that the demand has been so crazy for those programs.
Yeah, I believe I was reading a study the other day. I think it was that college admission in 2025 was up 10% across the board, as well as acceptance rates were up about 10 to 15% at most schools, but elite schools were down 4 to 5%, something like that.
Yeah. Now, what do you think is the relative savings that you had not going into the UW and choosing the path that you went?
Probably somewhere in the realm of, if I'd gone out of state, for instance, housing aside, because that would depend on where you go, tuition probably would have been somewhere in the 30 to 40,000 range a year.
Yeah.
So that would have been savings of about 80,000.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that because I went to an online program, I was able to work.
Yeah.
So I have enough savings personally to not need to work for the rest of my master's program, which was a big component of what I wanted to do. And I don't think I would have been able to do that had I gone to an in-person school.
Yeah,
or a traditional school.
It's such a financial quandary, I think. And as you say, you did have family help, but a lot of people don't have those resources. And can you tell us? What were when you actually decided to go a different path? What was the criteria that you were looking at? Did you have anything in mind that you were, let's say you were concerned about not? For instance, if you'd gone to law school, a lot of those things are sort of established, the pathway's established. But not doing that, did you have any concerns about switching to an alternate educational path and any other things that you would have to, supplement that path with? Or
So I knew a couple of things going into it, and a couple of things I didn't know into it that I do now that it should have been a concern of mine.
Yeah.
So the first thing was that I knew I was always going to have to get my master's social workers degree, where the majority of all of clinical jobs and the majority of jobs in general are behind a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't too worried about going to a school that wasn't well known for my bachelor's degree because a master's degree is really where it matters. And I knew I was going to go to a good master's
Yeah.
program. And a lot of what the work I did was to set myself up to be in a position where I could afford to go to a strong master's program and to really put all my effort into that program. Not to say I didn't put effort into my bachelor's program, but
Right.
additional effort was taken to ensure that my master's would go smoothly.
Yeah.
So, but that is a component to it. A lot of online schools won't have the same name recognition that bigger state schools or private schools will.
Yeah.
That matters within localities as well.
Right.
So, had I been just gone off and tried to find a job with just a bachelor's degree from Toro, that probably would have struggled in comparison to going to somewhere like Seattle University. And there is something to be said about that.
Yeah. How are the graduate programs viewing online undergraduate studies?
I mean, I got into
like specifically, not because I think most college campuses now have some online courses, but specifically programs that are simply online. The whole university is an online university.
For social work specifically, what really matters more so than about anything else is how you do on your practicum site, where you did it, the work you did, and the references you have from that. That mattered a lot. Social work as a field is a holistic field. They tend to look at the whole of everything, and because of that, and also because, as I mentioned before, social work has had an online presence. It's because of how rigorous the CSWE standards are. It's understood that alternative paths may need to be taken in order to complete internships or to work around problems that may arise.
Yeah.
So I think that for social work specifically, it really just matters getting a good practicum site. Now, that's sort of where an online school can be an issue, is because my school didn't offer any help getting a practicum site. That was very difficult because Seattle has Seattle U and UW being big social work schools.
Oh, I see.
A lot of like Seattle Children's, for example, you can't intern there at an intern level or a master level, I think, without going to UW.
Yeah,
it's a one-to-one pipeline. So
yeah, there's a
I
lot
had
of
a
those.
very difficult time finding an internship because my school wasn't able to help with that. I didn't understand that process going into it, and that definitely would have been something that I might have gone to a more conventional program had I known that. And part of the reason why I went to a conventional program for my master's.
Yeah, but you are pretty active in many of the community organizations here. Can you talk a little about your work there, and did they have a part in sort of how you developed your professional interests?
Yeah, so I worked at a homeless provider here in Seattle. And actually, I've done a lot of work in Pioneer Square, where we are currently. And throughout my internship working at that homeless provider, I worked with a bunch of different organizations. I got involved working with SCITCH, which is the Seattle King County Coalition on Homelessness. They do weekly meetings. They actually just had a meeting yesterday talking about how the FIFA World Cup is going to impact homeless services and the city as a whole. So they've been working on that. That was a big focus of what they've been working on for the past year.
Yeah.
I did some work with WHEEL, which is, I don't remember what the exact acronym stands for, but it's a coalition of different services and providers that work within women's housing.
Oh,
anywhere from domestic violence to homeless. They all talk about issues, and they make sure to keep each other informed about closures, as a closure somewhere will obviously impact everywhere else's space.
Right.
Some other program like the community dinners program, they run a few different dinners every week in Seattle. I worked at the one on Broadway and Republican. I believe it's the Disciples of Christ Church. They still do a meal on Mondays there.
How did you specifically figure out the solution to your internship problem? Did you just have to go the rounds and keep trying to find an organization?
I had to call a lot of people.
Interesting.
It was difficult because a lot of the places. So part of what makes a bachelor's level program tricky is that the CSWE wants you to have, because a bachelor's level degree is a generalist degree, it's supposed to be a degree that you can be put into pretty much any non-clinical setting and be able to succeed. That degree should say you are able to work in a variety of different fields.
Got it.
So the CSWE wants you to have experience working at the micro, meso, and macro levels. So the individual, group, and broader societal levels. So it was difficult finding a program that could give experience in all three, because most programs don't give experience in all three.
Yeah.
Typically, the ones that do are the big ones that, again, you'd have to go to those schools to do.
Right.
And the ones that weren't, typically, those were Christian organizations, so you would have to be a Christian to join them. I'm not, so I wasn't able to work with them. So that was, again, another barrier.
These are like charitable
Yeah,
organizations.
for most of the places I was talking to were within the nonprofit sector.
Got it.
So I just had to call places. Eventually, I found one that was willing to take a chance on me, and I think it went well.
How long did it take you to find?
About 3 weeks of applying and calling
Wow.
places and trying to hear back from them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, well, I mean, I think that even for the established pathways now, the internships, all those, it's even problematic to get internships now in a regular. You did go to, you went to Mercer Island High School, which I think is pretty reputable public high school. Certainly a school with more resources maybe than some of the other public schools. Can you talk about what sort of counseling programs were there to help you sort of bridge your graduating, your journey to college or higher ed?
Yeah, so there were, I remember it's been a while, and I wasn't, because I had already thought I was going to go to Bellevue College until the early summer, I didn't engage with a ton of the counseling services. I do remember that we had, and I believe this is pretty common in high schools from what I've heard, but from November to December of our senior year English class was all about focusing on writing college essays. There were workshops to help with counseling. You could send your essays in, and they would look over it and help write them.
Right.
So there was a lot of help on the getting in. They were, if you wanted to talk to a counselor regarding next steps, you could. I never did that, so I can't say to which extent they would push you, or if at all. But there were services able to help you to try to figure it out and help you get into school and help navigate that.
Yeah. Let's see. But do you generally do those? When do you start sort of getting counseling? Is it like your junior year?
It wasn't something, we always had a counselor assigned to us,
Mm-hmm.
right, the entire duration of high school.
I
But
see.
it wasn't something that was, it wasn't like, hey, it's your starter junior, you're going to go have your monthly meeting with this counselor to go over things. It was something you had to seek out and something you had to reach out to get.
Right.
I think maybe things have changed now. I've obviously been out for a few years, but
Right.
I don't ever recall it being something that was just directly offered to me. It was something I would have to go out and seek.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because that's kind of my perception of a lot of the counseling, which I feel, it's a big step. But I feel like this is an area where parents, if they have the resources, parents really try to step in because they're concerned for their kids. And it doesn't seem that the school programs, I mean, it seems like school programs have a lot of information, but I'm not sure how big a part that they play in that. Now, have you seen a trend among your peers to find alternative educational paths or a different route to pursuing their?
I would say among it depends, because most everybody I knew in high school went to a 4-year college. Most people I knew. Now, that being said, because of the path that I chose and because of the way I went, most of my friends were either coworkers or people I had with shared hobbies. So most of my friends either were working, took like an AA program, or joined the military. So
Interesting.
within them, I would say that they pretty much all of them took a non-traditional path.
Yeah.
But there are also people I met while on a non-traditional path, so it's a biased sample size.
But so you think that there are I think that's what the data shows, is that there is sort of a disillusionment with what's happening in the traditional 4-year university path, and that people are sort of looking at alternatives. So some of your friends went into is it the ROTC program? Is that what it is?
No, they just joined. They were enlisted.
Oh, wow.
Some of them did go into ROTC. Some just enlisted outright.
Interesting. And that's because those programs will fund your education.
It's partially that. It's in a couple of the cases, it's because they didn't feel ready to go for another 4 years of school, but they also didn't want to have a gap year or to just do nothing. They wanted to keep advancing.
Yeah.
So for them, it was they get good benefits out of it, and they're able to serve their country, as well as to have 4 years before having to move on to education. And then when they are in the position to move on to education, they'll be in a much better spot than they would be out of high school.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the gap year because that's sort of big. It's big in other countries. It's big in the UK and in Europe. We don't see a lot of that here. How do you feel about a gap year? I wish that they would encourage it more because it is really sort of it's not an appealing thing to come out of 12 years of school and then go right into something more intensive.
So I think that the first thing to say is that there are differences between the American and specifically the British educational system and Europe as a whole. The American system is a system that's made for anybody to be able to go to college. In England, for example, their college rates are actually much lower than ours, and it's much, at least to go to higher end colleges, it's much less likely. So in the UK, since it makes sense because there's a lot more programs surround. It's not a system that's made for everybody to go to school, and that's changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I think that's the first thing. As far as gap years go, I've never had a problem with gap years. I think it's important that people do something.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people take a gap year and then treat it like an extended summer.
Yeah.
And that can be a real problem because a year without any sort of learning or experiences or directing it's almost like a year's wasted. And when you look at things like compounding interest and retirements, your 20s are incredibly important for that time period. I think it's important that
I'm sorry. Let's back up. What are you talking about? Compounding interest for?
well, just for like retirements, right? So what I'm saying is missing a year is important because if you're going to go work for a year and gain life experience, that's fine. Like, people should do that.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing that people have work experience, especially working in retail or food service jobs. It gives you a lot of empathy and perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're going to spend a year, like if you're 18 or 19 and you're going to spend a year and you're not even traveling, just like maybe just staying at home or maybe working a small part-time job, I think that can be really damaging to career prospects and to retirement and really just most things, especially a year without any semblance of learning, whether self-structured or not.
Yeah.
That can really make it much harder to jump into a university level or anything to that.
Yeah,
to that effort.
I think that's the reason why a lot of kids don't. They don't. I mean, here they don't do it because there's so much pressure. There's more pressure in your generation than I think any generation before. I remember, for my generation, going to the U was always the fallback position, and now it's just like it's impossible to get into there. But so let's talk about this a little more. Because you're right, it's something I didn't even think about. The UK and Europe, they still have some sort of a residual caste system, and they have not all of them have sort of eliminated their aristocracy, so they still have that, especially in the UK. And I think that this is a big economic issue for them.
Yeah, the UK just treats education differently. I mean, you can see it in terms if you compare our universities, like the physical universities themselves, not even the educational components to them. If you look at UW is, I don't even know how many blocks. It's a massive university. It's very beautiful.
Yeah.
It's known for its cherry blossoms. It's known for its big squares and its intricate walkways. UK colleges on the other hand aren't. They're nice for sure, but they don't have the amenities or the luxuries that we do. And this has been a major component of cost, is that part of the reason why because UK programs are known for being affordable. They're known for being affordable, and if you can get into them, offering very good education that won't financially cripple you.
Oh, you mean you're saying that the cost of their education is less expensive than ours?
Yes.
That's interesting.
But their amenities are also a lot less.
One thing, like some of the top schools, they're a lot older than we are, so they're. But that's interesting. Do you think it's because they're more sponsored, or you're just saying that the structural costs there are much less because they're not trying to be a big resort?
It's both. I mean, I think that the evidence pretty clearly shows that just by not having as many amenities, they're able to lower costs.
Interesting.
Partially, it's because their system is made so that not everybody's expected to go get a 4-year degree.
Oh.
And that helps a lot with education,
Yeah.
with the education costs, because the government can afford to subsidize more that way.
How are they able to subsidize more that way?
Because if if you have a system where it's expected that everybody's going to go to college and you try to subsidize X percentage of students, you're going to invariably be able to subsidize a lower amount because everybody's going.
Oh, I see. What
If
you're
you have 100% going, you can't subsidize 20% of everyone,
Yeah.
whereas you could if only 30% are going.
So even in this day and age, you're saying in Europe and well, specifically the UK, they're not pushing all their students to go to college and be engineers or
Just with college attendance, that hasn't been what I've seen. I have friends in the UK. They've
Yeah.
said that that's why there's such an immense pressure on their A levels and their final exams. It could be changing now. I'm not from the UK, but
So only a certain number are actually going into that.
yeah,
See,
I mean,
interesting.
there's other options. You can study abroad, and there's European universities are there. It's different for the EU specifically because they have a lot of reciprocity within the universities, so it's easier. But
What do their standardized exams test? Because it's the same thing where they test everyone, right? Coming out of school, they test
Yep.
everyone. Okay.
yeah, I think you can choose to skip them if you don't intend to go to higher level, much like the American SATs or ACTs.
Right.
But from what I was talking with my friends about and from what I've seen, they're called the A-level exams. They're important exams that show proficiencies in a variety of subjects.
Yeah.
Depending on, you can choose which exams you want depending on where you want to go. Like I had one of my friends who I don't think took any mathematics A-levels because she wanted to go to school for directing or acting or something to that impact, to where math wouldn't be required as much.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not sure if she actually ended up doing that, but
Well, so and what? But if you're a student and you decide to go to like a university or even a vocational school, do you pay for it or is it sponsored? Like certain countries in Europe, education is free for their young.
I think depending on how much money you make, you pay some. I know
Oh,
it was
see.
very very cheap,
Got it.
somewhere in like the
It's like a sliding scale.
yeah. It was when my one friend went, it was like £6,000 a year or something.
Wow.
So very very low.
Okay, and I did hear this because I knew someone their kids were going to Oxford, and I was shocked at how inexpensive it is to go to. I mean, it's difficult to get in, but I was shocked at how inexpensive it is. Chalk that up to free rent. I'm guessing those buildings are already paid for. But I do remember I knew someone who he's from Holland, Netherlands. They call him either way. And he had to took his college placement tests, and they sort of test you there for your abilities, and then they allow you they'll pay for your education, but they sort of guide you to the field that they're going to pay for, that they've assessed that you're. And he actually wanted to study something else, so he came here to the States and went through very expensive international student fees. And paid for an expensive just to study what he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, you even see certain the U.S. does this to a degree. Like for the University of Kansas, where I was going, there was an option that would pay for. It would have covered the entirety of in-state tuition, but I'm not in-state from Kansas, so it would cover somewhere in the realm of like 70% of my tuition or something like that.
Wow.
I would just have to. The conditions were I would have to study social work, obviously. And I would have to study clinical social work specifically, so that would allow me to do therapy and limited diagnosis,
Wow.
and which is what I'm studying. So
Yeah.
those two worked out.
Yeah.
But the other part was that I would have to do specific projects regarding rural services in Kansas, and then I would have to commit to working. I believe it was 3 or 5 years in rural Kansas after graduation. So there were.
Is that one of the reasons why you ended up going to?
I ended up going to the University of Kansas because, one, it's a very good school. I'm able to work. I will be working at Children's Mercy in Kansas, which for psychiatric and behavioral health, it's the 5th highest ranked children's hospital in the country.
Wow.
And it's a training hospital for the University of Kansas Medical Center. So
That's awesome.
that's very tempting. And then
Yeah.
as well as I heard back from them in January. January.
Wow.
Whereas I heard back from UT Austin in late April. So that made it very difficult for me I would only have a month to set up housing and internship. Like I had everything sorted at KU 2 months before I heard back from UT Austin, and that made it very difficult. I probably would have gone with Austin had I heard back from the same time.
Yeah.
But there's just for a program that starts on June 1st, hearing back late April is very very hard.
It's tough.
So
Especially, these are big costs.
yeah,
that
in
you're trying to
Austin,
set
getting
up.
housing in Austin is difficult.
Yeah.
And I was way past the housing debt, or way past the preferential housing for Austin at the
Oh,
time
for
applying for
oh
and
God,
I probably wouldn't be able
there's
to
a deadline
afford.
for that. Yeah.
I don't think I'd be able to afford living off campus.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the it's the same problem with here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Living off campus is so expensive. Yeah. So actually, that's interesting. We should probably follow up with a comparative, because the thing is that the one thing I think is that partly because of the way that their society is structured, there's always been, they have never closed off these paths for vocational schools, as opposed to the liberal arts model where you go to school to just sort of find yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you can pursue graduate school for something more vocational oriented. That sort of privilege has sort of been, it's always been only for a certain class there. I don't know if they're, like, for instance, in the U.S., I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that, especially from the community colleges, that education has been the big equalizer,
Mm-hmm.
right? That you sort of have socioeconomic movement within society because of education.
Well, that's the question, especially now when you have, like, I couldn't imagine being a graduating senior today when you have, I mean, we have AI, we have no idea what the impacts of that are going to be.
Yeah.
It could be minor, it could be catastrophic,
Right.
and having to spend 4 years committing to a program, who knows what the marketplace is and the economic landscape is going to look like after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very, very risky. I don't think there's any safe paths right now, to be honest. Even like the staple, like engineering used to be one of the staples of safe paths. Now it's seeing incredibly low job growth rate. It's seeing a lot of outsourcing with a lot of H-1B visas are coming in and taking it.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to be able to say, I will go engineering, study engineering, and be able to get a high-paying job.
Yeah.
That's a questionable
Yeah.
statement now.
So now, for your generation, I want to say there's been an unprecedented series of crises happening. You can answer this on a personal level or from what you've seen. I mean, what are your feelings about that coming into? You guys are all coming of age now, and coming into a society that, I mean, let's face it, there have been. We can say some of these things were unforeseen events, right? But we can also say that there's been some bad decisions in previous generations, bad choices that have really, the bulk of this, the cost, the consequences have fallen on your generation. How do you feel about that?
It's. I think the biggest two problems I see when I look at modern America, one is outsourcing or insourcing at the expense of American jobs, and two would be housing. I think those are the two biggest crises facing Americans, and they both regard the affordability crisis, which is the broader term I would put them under.
Right.
I think it's very hard when you have a company like Facebook lay off 1,000 people and then apply for 1,000 H-1B visas. It really, those are supposed to be need-based visas for occupational jobs that we lack in the general American public. But it's hard for me to believe how that's possible when you are able to look at a case where they just fired Americans doing that job and hiring other people, especially.
Yeah.
And then it becomes even more obvious when somewhere like Microsoft, where an H-1B engineer working at Microsoft makes somewhere like $55,000 or $60,000 a year, when the equivalent American job would make $140,000 a year. It's painfully obvious what's happening here, and that's destroy the tech sector. It's a really big problem, especially when we have things like O-1 visas, which would be for those for doctors and neurosurgeons where we might not actually have enough people from. I think that's very difficult. From a job standpoint, I think that's just an ever-present risk of you can be laid off for somebody who will work for cheaper, who got a cheaper education, and who lived in a lower cost of living area. I think that's a big risk, and I think regarding tech, that's one of the largest risks above AI is one of the largest risks of tech. And AI is just a different facet of this. It's still
Yeah.
just laying off somebody
Yeah.
for
Cheaper labor. That's
but
right.
and then the question is it even cheaper? Because there was a Forbes study that came out 2 days ago that showed like NVIDIA, they laid off a lot of their IT people, and they burn an equivalent token cost of a year's labor. They burn that in 3 months. So they're actually spending more money on AI. So I guess the argument is that it's more efficient, but we'll see. There's been a lot of
We haven't seen the
articles.
efficiency yet.
There's been a lot of articles about people saying it's just not more efficient.
Yeah.
They're spending more money on a less efficient
Well, and because
services.
I think there's so many errors, they're just training.
Yeah.
The other problem is I think they're pushing too hard, too fast for that technology. Okay, so you talked about affordability in housing, which I think is a bigger, I mean, it's a very big issue across sectors, right? What are the feelings for you guys as far as, we have the classic American dream, which is to own a mortgage. And to hawk yourself to get that, that kind of a...
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you look at somewhere like last year was actually an anomaly when you look at house buying. What was very typical was that 33% of single-family homes on the American market were bought by investors for investment purposes. What's interesting, and this is, you basically have seen this trend primarily, I mean, for the past, since 2008 really, but especially since COVID, that number's accelerated. One thing that's interesting about that number is that last year, private equity sold, like big private equity, we're talking like Blackstone specifically, Vanguard, Fidelity,
Right.
they sold more single-family homes than they bought, which is really interesting. Now, you could say that could be done as a hedge against the market. The market last year was particularly volatile, and this year it's, again, been very volatile.
Right.
But it's an interesting number. But regardless, even with them selling more homes than they bought, 33% of homes were bought for investment purposes.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult to be able, because these people can afford to pay above market value, afford to pay more than you can pay because they will be generating a profit in the future.
Right.
So it's very hard for anybody to compete.
Yeah.
And this number is even worse considering that the majority of investment properties, I think in 2024 it was somewhere like, well, as far as what private equity bought, somewhere like 75% was in the East and West Coast. So this number is even higher within these specific segments. It really makes, like, I love Seattle.
Yeah.
I would love to work here, but I don't think there's ever a chance where I could own a home unless I inherited one in Seattle.
Yeah.
There's no way I would be able to make enough money for that.
Yeah. It's really I think it's especially for your generation. It's kind of it's basically a big crisis because there are many people who say that that's basically the end of the American dream as we knew it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because you have what is an indisputably left-wing turn in terms of people's economics. There's been studies that have shown that my generation is more right-wing socially than most generations are at this time, because obviously every generation starts out being very left-wing socially.
Right.
So there's debates about the social views of my generation.
Yeah.
But economically, my generation tends to lean fairly far left, or fairly left-wing at the very least, regarding just capitalism or housing or any of this in general. And I think it's
distribution of wealth.
Yeah, I think if people want to start talking about why this generation it's because this generation is one of some of the only generations in America to be poorer than their parents.
Yeah.
That's a major thing.
Yeah.
The other part of it is you can't expect any generation to be happy with the current economic system if they can't afford to own a home.
That's right.
That's always been one of the litmus tests of the American economy
That's
is
right.
can you own a home? And the answer is resounding for the majority of people in my generation. It's going to be no, unless they go move to areas which are more undesirable and economics. It's like the Midwest or the lower Southeast.
And most times you don't have a choice because you have to follow where your employment opportunities take you. So that's a difficult. Yes, I definitely agree with that. Well, Colin, we thank you for coming to join us and share your story on the podcast. We hope to follow up with you at some time in the future and keep in touch. And of course, to bring more a broader perspective from other student areas onto the podcast for this. So thank you and good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.